Widower rancher bought her to shame her abusive husband. True love bloomed instead. The sun rose slowly over the Montana plains, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. Samuel Hayes stood on the edge of his ranch looking out over the fields that stretched for miles. The land was quiet except for the occasional sound of a horse whinnying in the distance or the soft rustle of the wind through the tall grass. Samuel had always loved this solitude. Since the death of his wife 3 years ago, he had spent his days tending to the cattle and the land, keeping himself busy to avoid the hollow ache that sometimes settled in his chest. Even though the ranch kept him occupied, Samuel could not ignore the unrest growing in the nearby town. Rumors had reached his ears, stories of a young woman named Clara Monroe, trapped in a marriage that brought her nothing but pain. Samuel had heard bits and pieces from the townsfolk, whispers of a man who treated her cruelly, controlling her every move and leaving her afraid to step outside her own home. Samuel didn't know Clara personally, but the thought of someone living in such fear sparked something deep inside him. It was not pity that moved him. It was a sense of justice, a call to action he could not ignore. Samuel had never been the kind of man to meddle in the affairs of others. He believed in letting people live their own lives, but there was something different about Clara's story. He could not turn away. That night, after feeding the cattle and locking the barn, he sat at his old wooden table, the same one his late wife had polished every weekend, and thought about what he could do. The more he thought, the clearer it became. He had to help her. She needed a way out, and he could offer that, even if it meant stepping into dangerous territory.
The next morning, Samuel made his way to the town.
It was a small place, with dusty streets and a few shops that lined the main road. People knew him as the rancher who kept to himself, but treated everyone with fairness and respect. He stopped at the general store, buying a few supplies, but his mind was elsewhere. Today, he had a mission. He needed to find a way to reach Clara without drawing too much attention. He did not want to create a scandal. He only wanted to give her freedom. He asked quietly about Clara, careful not to alert anyone who might report back to her husband. The storekeeper, an older man with kind eyes, looked uncomfortable at first, but then leaned closer. "You mean the girl trapped in that house with... well, you know who," he said softly. Samuel nodded. "I want to help her," he said firmly, "but I need a way to do it safely." The man studied him for a moment and then nodded slowly. "If anyone can do it, it's you, Samuel. Just be careful. That man is not someone to cross lightly." Samuel thanked him and left the store, his mind already planning the next steps. Over the following days, Samuel observed Clara from a distance, learning her routines without being noticed. He watched as she walked to the small garden behind her house, as she tended to the few flowers she had, always keeping her head low, as if hoping no one would see her. He saw the fear in her eyes whenever her husband appeared. It made Samuel's chest tighten. How could someone live like this? How could someone feel trapped in their own home, longing for freedom but too afraid to reach for it? He decided then that he would give her a chance to live without fear. The plan Samuel formed was simple but daring. He would offer to buy her freedom, not as a romantic gesture, at least not yet, but as a way to save her from the life that held her captive. In his mind, it was a practical solution. He had the means, she had the need. All that remained was courage. His courage to approach her husband, and her courage to accept a life she could only imagine. Samuel approached the task with careful determination. He arranged to meet Clara's husband, a man known in town for his short temper and harsh ways. The encounter was tense. Samuel spoke with calm authority, explaining his offer. He would pay a fair price to ensure Clara could leave without dispute, without anger or argument. At first, the man laughed, thinking it a joke, but Samuel's steady gaze and unwavering voice convinced him that Samuel was serious. After a long moment of tense silence, the man agreed. It was done. Clara could leave. Her life could change. The day Samuel went to bring Clara to the ranch was overcast, the clouds heavy with the promise of rain. He found her standing in the doorway of her house, clutching a small bag with a few belongings. Her eyes widened when she saw him, and Samuel could see the mixture of fear, relief, and disbelief. I don't know if I can," she whispered. Samuel gave her a gentle smile, the kind that spoke of trust without words. "You can," he said. "I'll be here to help. You're safe now." Clara hesitated, looking back at the house that had been her prison for so long. It was not just the fear of leaving, it was the fear of stepping into the unknown. But she had been trapped for too long, and she knew it. With a deep breath, she nodded. Samuel extended his hand, and together they walked down the dusty path to the horse-drawn wagon that would take them to the ranch. The ride was quiet, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the soft whisper of the wind through the trees. Clara felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease, though the fear still lingered. Samuel noticed her unease and offered small, steady words of encouragement. "We'll take it one step at a time," he said. "No rush. No pressure." As they neared the ranch, Clara's eyes widened at the sight of the land stretching before her. She had never seen anything like it. Rolling fields, wide-open spaces, and the sense of freedom that seemed to radiate from the earth itself. Samuel introduced her to the small cabin that would be her new home. It was simple but comfortable, with a firewood stove, a sturdy bed, and a window that looked out over the pastures. Clara could feel, for the first time in years, a sense of possibility. She could breathe freely. She could live. The first days on the ranch were a mixture of adjustment and discovery. Clara learned to help with the chores, feeding the animals and learning the rhythm of ranch life. Samuel gave her space, watching quietly as she adapted to her new surroundings. He noticed the way her eyes lit up when she saw a foal running in the field, or how she laughed softly at the antics of the chickens. It was a small, tentative happiness, but it was a start. Samuel also felt a stirring inside him he had not expected. He had intended only to save Clara, to give her freedom, and nothing more. But watching her move through the ranch with curiosity and courage, he felt a connection that went beyond duty. He pushed the thought away, telling himself it was too soon, that she had suffered too much already. For now, he would be her protector, her guide, her friend. That was enough. Evenings at the ranch were quiet, filled with the soft glow of the fire and the distant calls of night birds. Clara would sit by the window looking out over the fields, and Samuel would join her, offering small talk about the work of the day or the habits of the animals. Slowly, trust began to build between them. Clara felt safer than she had in years, and Samuel felt a sense of purpose he had thought lost forever. They were beginning a new chapter, one written not in fear, but in possibility. Though the shadow of her past still lingered, Clara started to dream. She imagined walking through the fields without worry, tending to the animals, learning more about the land she now called home. Samuel watched these moments quietly, understanding that true healing would take time, but confident that Clara had the strength to reclaim her life. He had given her freedom, yes, but the courage to use it would come from within her own heart. By the end of the first week, a rhythm had settled over the ranch. Clara moved with more confidence, and Samuel found himself enjoying her company more than he had anticipated. It was a strange, new feeling for both of them. Hope, possibility, and a tentative bond forming where there had once been only fear and solitude. Neither spoke of the future, for it was still uncertain, but in the quiet moments of shared work and quiet conversation, a small spark of connection had begun to glow. And so, life on the ranch began anew, with two souls brought together by circumstance, bound by trust, and unaware that what had started as an act of rescue might one day grow into something far deeper. Life on the ranch began to settle into a rhythm, though it was a rhythm neither Samuel nor Clara had ever known before. Clara woke each morning to the soft golden light spilling across the fields, a light that made the world look new and full of possibility. Birds sang as they moved among the trees, and the air smelled faintly of earth and grass. For the first time in many years, Clara felt that she could breathe freely without fear. She dressed quickly, eager to start her day. Yet her movements were careful, as if she was still learning to trust the world around her. Samuel, too, found the mornings comforting in a way he had not expected. He would rise before sunrise, preparing the animals for the day, and yet he now looked forward to seeing Clara as she stepped out onto the porch, a small smile on her face. He admired her quietly, not in the way a man would think of romantic desire, but in the way a gardener admires a plant beginning to grow after months of neglect. She was fragile in some ways, yes, but strong in ways that made him proud. Her courage was quiet, unassuming, yet undeniable. The early days were full of learning. Samuel taught Clara how to care for the animals, how to feed the cattle in the early morning chill, and how to handle the stubborn horses with patience rather than force. Clara listened carefully, absorbing every word, though she occasionally stumbled over a task and flushed with embarrassment. Samuel never scolded her. Instead, he offered gentle guidance, showing her how to tie a knot or how to calm a frightened calf. Slowly, she began to gain confidence, realizing that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. During these moments, Clara began to feel something she had not felt in years, a sense of belonging. The ranch was vast and empty in many places, but it had a heartbeat that she could feel if she listened closely. The animals, the wind through the grass, even the quiet hum of the old cabin. All of it seemed to welcome her. Samuel noticed the change, too. He would catch her gazing across the fields with a look of quiet wonder, her hands resting on the wooden fence as though she could somehow touch the freedom she now had. There were times when he caught himself watching her, and realizing that the feeling in his chest was more than simple concern. It was a quiet admiration that made him feel alive again. Their days were long, filled with work and quiet conversation. Samuel would sometimes talk about the ranch's history, how his family had built it from scratch, and the lessons he had learned along the way. Clara listened with interest, asking questions and sometimes sharing her own experiences, though she always did so cautiously. She was learning to trust, but it was a slow process. She had been hurt too deeply to open herself completely, and Samuel understood that. He never pushed. He gave her the space to grow, just as he had allowed the land and the animals to grow under his care. Evenings were a different rhythm altogether. The work was done. The animals fed and settled for the night, and the sun sank behind the distant hills in a blaze of orange and pink. Samuel and Clara would sit by the fire in the cabin, sharing simple meals and talking quietly. Sometimes they did not speak at all, simply enjoying the comfort of another person's presence. There was no need for words when silence itself could speak volumes. Clara began to notice that she laughed more often, the sound lighter and freer than it had been in years. Samuel felt a warmth in his heart that had been missing since the death of his wife. The cabin, small and simple, was beginning to feel like a home, not just for the body, but for the spirit. As the days passed, Clara also began exploring the ranch on her own. Samuel encouraged it, though he watched from a distance to ensure she was safe. She wandered along the streams, watched the sunrise behind the hills, and discovered hidden corners of the land that felt magical to her. In these moments, she felt a sense of freedom that she had never known. A freedom that came not just from leaving her old life behind, but from discovering the world for herself. Each day she became more confident, more certain that she could live without fear, and more willing to trust Samuel, who had given her this chance. One morning, Samuel took Clara on a horseback ride across the far fields. The horses moved steadily beneath them, their hooves thudding softly against the earth. Clara held the reins tightly. Her knuckles white at first, but soon she relaxed, feeling the rhythm of the animal beneath her. Samuel rode beside her, guiding her gently, offering encouragement. "You're doing well," he said quietly. Clara smiled, the warmth of his words making her feel safe and capable at the same time. "I didn't think I could do this," she admitted. "I didn't think I could ever feel like I belonged somewhere." Samuel glanced at her, his own heart stirring. "You belong here," he said simply. "You deserve this place, and you deserve to be happy." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. They worked together in the fields, repaired fences, and tended to sick animals. Clara learned quickly, her hands becoming skillful and steady. Samuel was impressed not just by her determination, but by her compassion. She treated every animal with care, speaking softly to the frightened or injured ones, and Samuel admired her patience. It reminded him of the qualities his late wife had possessed, the kindness and quiet strength that had made her so beloved. He found himself sharing stories of his past, of his wife and the life they had shared, and Clara listened with understanding and empathy. She, too, began sharing fragments of her own life. The dream she had once held before her world had become filled with fear. One evening, a storm rolled across the plains. The sky darkened and the wind whipped through the trees, carrying the first heavy drops of rain. Clara watched from the cabin window, feeling a sense of awe at the power of nature. Samuel joined her, standing silently beside her as the storm raged. It was a moment of quiet reflection, both of them feeling small in the face of something much larger than themselves. Yet in that small cabin, with the wind howling outside, they found comfort in each other's presence. It was a subtle, unspoken understanding. They were no longer alone, and together they could face whatever came. As the days turned into weeks, Clara began to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt lighter, freer, and more capable. She laughed without restraint, walked with confidence, and even began to take joy in the work she once thought impossible. Samuel, too, noticed a change in his own heart. He had always been a solitary man, but now he found himself looking forward to each day, anticipating Clara's presence and the small moments they shared. It was a connection built not on romance, but on trust, respect, and a shared experience of rebuilding their lives. Even the simple tasks became opportunities for connection. Feeding the animals, mending fences, or carrying water from the well became moments of teamwork and shared accomplishment. They joked, teased each other lightly, and supported one another through the challenges of ranch life. Clara's confidence grew, and Samuel's admiration for her strength and courage deepened. They were becoming a team, not just in work, but in life, slowly learning to rely on each other in ways neither had expected. Yet beneath the surface of their growing friendship, there was a quiet tension. Samuel found himself thinking of Clara in ways he had not anticipated. He cared for her deeply, more than he had thought possible after losing his wife. He did not yet speak of these feelings, unsure if she felt the same, unsure if it was appropriate so soon. Clara, too, felt an unfamiliar warmth toward Samuel. She trusted him, leaned on him, and sometimes wondered what life might be like if he were more than a protector. But she did not voice these thoughts, still cautious after so many years of fear and pain. One afternoon, as they worked together in the fields, Clara paused to watch a herd of deer grazing at the edge of the forest. The sight was beautiful, serene, and she felt a sense of peace wash over her. Samuel joined her, standing silently for a few moments, sharing the view. "It's beautiful," Clara whispered. "It makes me feel like anything is possible." Samuel nodded, understanding perfectly. "It is," he said, "and you deserve all of it." In that simple exchange, an unspoken bond was reaffirmed. They were helping each other heal, and slowly, trust and friendship were blossoming into something more. The evenings were quiet, filled with small routines, preparing meals, sharing stories, or simply sitting by the fire. Each night Clara felt a little braver, a little freer, and a little more alive. Samuel found himself drawn to her presence, the gentle strength she displayed, and the way she faced each day with courage. They were both discovering that life could be full of hope and possibility again, and that perhaps happiness was not just a distant dream but something tangible, something they could reach together. By the end of the second month, Clara had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, spoke with clarity, and smiled without fear. Samuel, too, felt lighter, more at peace, and more alive than he had in years. They had both begun to heal, and in doing so had begun to form a bond that neither had anticipated. It was a bond built not on obligation, but on mutual respect, understanding, and the shared experience of overcoming hardship. And so, life on the ranch continued, each day bringing new challenges, small triumphs, and quiet moments of connection. Clara and Samuel were no longer two people bound by circumstance alone. They were companions in life, learning to trust, to hope, and to dream once more. The past was still present in their memories, but it no longer defined them. Together they were creating a new life, one step at a time. And slowly, quietly, the seeds of something deeper were beginning to bloom. Life on the ranch had grown into a comfortable rhythm for both Clara and Samuel, but peace, Samuel knew, could never last forever. The past, no matter how far away it seemed, had a way of catching up to people. Clara's life before the ranch had been one of fear and hardship, and although Samuel had given her a safe place, the shadows of her past lingered like quiet echoes waiting to be heard. One crisp morning, as Clara carried a basket of fresh eggs from the chicken coop to the kitchen, Samuel noticed her walking a little more carefully than usual. Her gaze kept darting toward the road that led into the ranch, a road she had never truly seen as safe. Samuel stopped what he was doing with the hay, wiping his hands on his worn jeans, and walked over. "Clara," he asked gently, "is something wrong?" Clara hesitated. She had been trying to push away the worry she felt each day, telling herself that the past was behind her, but deep down, a small voice whispered that it might not be over. She shook her head slightly and forced a smile. "I'm fine," she said softly, though the tension in her shoulders betrayed her words. Samuel studied her for a moment, sensing her unease, but he did not push. He knew that trust, once earned, could never be forced. Later that afternoon, Samuel rode toward the edge of the property to check the fences along the northern field. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light across the rolling hills. Clara followed him on foot, carrying a small bundle of tools to help with repairs. They walked side by side, talking quietly about the animals, the weather, and the tasks that needed attention. It was a pleasant, ordinary moment, the kind Samuel cherished, until a cloud passed over the sun and the wind shifted suddenly, bringing with it a faint but unmistakable sound. A man's voice carried across the field, sharp and demanding. Samuel stiffened. He recognized the tone immediately. An air of control, a voice that had made Clara flinch even in stories she had shared. Clara froze, her basket slipping from her hands. Samuel's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his jacket, not out of violence but readiness. The man's voice was closer now, and Samuel could see a figure walking along the dirt road leading into the ranch. It was Clara's estranged husband, the man who had kept her trapped for so long. Clara's eyes widened with fear, and she took a small step back. Samuel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said calmly. "You're safe. I won't let anything happen to you." Clara nodded, though her voice caught in her throat. He's here," she whispered. Samuel's jaw tightened, and his mind raced. He knew he had to act carefully. Confrontation was inevitable, but he could not let Clara face this alone. The man approached, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of Samuel and Clara together. "So this is where you ran off to," he said, his tone cold but measured. "Thought you could hide from me?" Samuel's posture remained calm, steady, though his gaze was firm. "She is not hiding," Samuel said clearly. "She is free now, and I suggest you leave before this becomes a bigger problem than it needs to be." Clara's husband laughed, a sound that made her stomach churn. "Free?" he scoffed. "You think you can just buy her freedom? She belongs to me." Samuel's hand moved slightly, not threateningly, but as a reminder that he would protect her at all costs. "No one belongs to anyone," Samuel said. "She has a choice now, and her choice is to live without fear. I suggest you respect that." The tension hung thick in the air, like a storm waiting to break. Clara stood frozen, unsure whether to speak, to run, or to trust Samuel's presence. She had felt fear before, the kind that made her heart pound and her hand shake, but now there was also something new, something protective and steady beside her that gave her courage. She took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders, and met her husband's gaze with a quiet strength he had never seen in her before. "You have no power over me anymore," Clara said, her voice firm yet steady. "I am leaving the life I had with you behind. You cannot control me, and you cannot hurt me anymore." Her words were measured, each one carefully chosen, and for a brief moment the man seemed taken aback. He had grown used to fear in her eyes, compliance in her voice, but now he saw neither. Samuel noticed the change in Clara and felt a surge of pride. He had given her safety, but she was finding her own strength as well. He stepped closer to her, a silent gesture of support. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly. Clara's eyes flickered toward him, gratitude and trust reflected in her gaze. The man's expression hardened again, but he no longer had the same confidence he once wielded. Samuel remained calm, unwavering, and Clara, sensing his support, felt her fear diminish slightly. "I will not fight you here," Samuel said, his voice firm but controlled. "You can leave now and avoid making this worse for yourself." After a long, tense silence, Clara's husband finally turned and walked back toward the road, muttering under his breath. Samuel and Clara watched until he disappeared from view, the threat gone, though the memory lingered like a shadow. Clara's knees weakened slightly, and Samuel moved to support her, steadying her with a gentle hand. "It's over," he said quietly. "You're safe now." Clara nodded, tears threatening to spill, not from fear this time, but from the release of tension that had been building for so long. In the days that followed, Clara slowly began to process what had happened. Samuel gave her space, allowing her to grieve and reflect, but he was always nearby, ready to offer comfort or guidance. They continued their daily routines on the ranch, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and enjoying the quiet beauty of the land. Yet there was a new sense of strength in Clara's step, a confidence that had begun to grow within her. She was learning that she could face challenges without fear, that she had a voice, and that she could stand up for herself. Samuel noticed the changes too. The girl who had once flinched at the sound of a raised voice now walked through the fields with steady determination. She spoke her mind, asked questions, and even laughed freely, her joy no longer overshadowed by fear. Samuel felt a deep sense of admiration and respect for her. She had endured so much, and yet she was rising above it, proving to herself and to him that she was strong and capable. One afternoon they were repairing a section of the fence near the creek when Clara paused, leaning on her shovel and looking out over the water. "I never thought I could feel like this," she admitted softly. "I never thought I could feel safe, or happy, or even free." Samuel nodded, understanding perfectly. "It takes time," he said, "but you've come a long way already. You're stronger than you know." Clara smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and pride in her expression. Their bond grew stronger in the weeks that followed. They shared quiet meals in the cabin, watched the sun set behind the hills, and spent evenings talking by the fire. Clara began to open up more, sharing memories of her childhood, her dreams, and even the small joys she had once taken for granted. Samuel listened patiently, offering encouragement and understanding. He too shared stories of his past, of his late wife, and of the life he had built on the ranch. In these moments, trust and connection deepened, and a sense of companionship began to grow. One evening, as a soft rain fell outside, Clara and Samuel sat by the fire, the cabin warm and cozy. Clara sipped tea, her hands wrapped around the cup, and Samuel watched the flames flicker in the fireplace. "I never thought I could feel this calm," Clara said quietly. "I never thought I could trust someone again." Samuel reached over, brushing a strand of hair from her face gently. "You can," he said softly. "You've already proven that you are brave, capable, and strong. You deserve to feel safe and happy." Clara's eyes met his, and in that moment there was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition of the bond that had formed through shared experiences, trust, and healing. As the storm outside continued, Clara realized that the fear she had carried for so long was slowly fading. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer had the power to define her. She had faced it with Samuel by her side, and she had emerged stronger. Samuel, too, recognized the change in both of them. They had faced a challenge together and had come through it, not just unscathed, but stronger and more connected. In the weeks that followed, life returned to a gentle rhythm. Clara worked with Samuel in the fields, tended the animals, and explored the ranch with newfound confidence. Samuel watched her closely, always ready to offer guidance, support, or a comforting word. Their bond continued to grow, built on trust, respect, and the shared experience of overcoming hardship. And so, as the days passed, Clara learned that true freedom was not just the absence of fear, but the presence of courage, trust, and the ability to face the world on her own terms. Samuel in turn realized that love and companionship could grow from the most unexpected beginnings, and that sometimes the act of saving someone else could lead to healing for both hearts. Life on the ranch had changed them both. The past had threatened to shadow their happiness, but together they had found strength, courage, and a growing bond that promised new beginnings. And in the quiet moments, as the sun set and the wind whispered through the fields, they both knew that they were no longer alone, and that the future, once uncertain, was now full of possibility. Life on the ranch had grown calm and steady for both Clara and Samuel, but it was no longer just about work or survival. There was a gentle rhythm to their days, a quiet joy that seemed to grow with each passing sunrise. Clara had learned to trust the land, the animals, and most importantly, Samuel. And Samuel had discovered that sharing his life, his routines, and his memories could bring him a sense of peace he had not felt since the death of his wife. One morning, Clara woke to the sound of birds singing outside the cabin window. The sky was painted in soft hues of pink and gold, and a fresh breeze carried the scent of the meadow. She dressed quickly, eager to start the day, and stepped outside. Samuel was already in the barn, preparing the horses for the morning's work. He looked up when he saw her, and a small smile brightened his face. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and warm. Clara smiled back. "Good morning. Ready for the chores?" Samuel chuckled softly. "Always." The day began with feeding the animals. Clara moved confidently among the cattle and chickens, carrying buckets of feed and speaking gently to the animals as they gathered around her. Samuel watched her, impressed at how quickly she had adapted. There had been a time when she had flinched at the sight of a horse, or hesitated to enter the barn, but now she moved with purpose and ease. Her confidence inspired him, and he felt a quiet pride in watching her embrace this life. After the chores, Samuel suggested they take a walk through the fields before the sun grew too hot. Clara agreed, enjoying the opportunity to explore the ranch in a way that was not tied to work. They walked side by side, the tall grass brushing against their legs, and spoke of small things. The shapes of clouds, the songs of birds, and the changes in the seasons. There was a lightness to the conversation, a comfort that came from knowing they were both present and safe. Clara realized that she looked forward to these walks, not just for the beauty of the land, but for the quiet companionship she shared with Samuel. As they reached a small stream that curved through the fields, Samuel paused. "This is one of my favorite places on the ranch," he said softly. "When I need to think or just feel calm, I come here." Clara knelt by the water, dipping her fingers into the cool stream. "It's beautiful," she said, her eyes reflecting the sunlight. "I can see why you like it." They sat together on the grass, the sound of the water flowing nearby, and for a moment there was silence. It was the kind of silence that felt comfortable, not awkward, and it deepened their connection in a way words could not. Over the next few weeks, they spent more time together outside the chores. Samuel taught Clara how to ride horses across the open fields, guiding her gently as she learned to balance and control the animal beneath her. At first, Clara had been nervous, gripping the reins tightly and keeping her body stiff, but Samuel's calm guidance and encouragement helped her relax. She began to laugh at herself when she made mistakes, and Samuel laughed with her, the sound bright and genuine. These moments were simple, yet they built trust and joy, strengthening the bond between them. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire in the cabin after finishing the day's work. Clara would help Samuel prepare meals, and they would eat together at the small wooden table, sharing stories from the day. Sometimes they would talk about dreams, hopes, and memories. Samuel shared stories of his late wife, of life before the ranch had been his alone, and Clara listened with empathy, understanding that he too had experienced loss. In turn, Clara shared memories from her childhood, small dreams she had once held, and even the little joys that had stayed with her despite the hardships she had endured. One night as they sat by the fire sipping tea, Clara spoke softly. "I never thought life could feel like this," she said, her gaze on the flickering flames. "I mean peaceful, safe, happy. I thought I would always feel scared or trapped or Alone. Samuel reached out and lightly touched her hand. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "And you don't have to be afraid. You've come so far, Clara. You're stronger than you realize." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and trust, and for the first time she felt that she truly belonged somewhere. Their days together were filled with laughter and small adventures. They explored hidden corners of the ranch, climbed gentle hills to watch the sunset, and sometimes simply lay in the grass, staring at the clouds passing overhead. Clara began to notice the little things about Samuel, how he moved with quiet confidence, how his eyes lit up when he spoke about the animals or the land, how patient and kind he was even when faced with challenges. Samuel, in turn, noticed Clara's courage, her kindness, and the way she smiled even when tired. Each day, their bond grew stronger, built on shared experiences, trust, and respect. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of fence together, Clara paused and looked at Samuel. "I never thought I would feel this alive," she said softly. "I mean, after everything, I thought I would always feel small, afraid, like I didn't belong anywhere." Samuel smiled gently. "You belong here," he said simply. "You've earned it. And not just the ranch. You deserve to feel safe, happy, and free. You deserve to live your life fully." Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something she did not yet understand. As the days turned into weeks, Clara's confidence continued to grow. She learned to handle more complex tasks on the ranch, taking responsibility for certain areas and even guiding Samuel when needed. The partnership between them became natural and effortless, and they both realized that they were no longer just two people living on the same land. They were companions, connected by mutual respect, trust, and a growing sense of care for each other. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, Samuel suggested they take the horses for a ride along the ridge. Clara agreed eagerly, enjoying the feeling of wind on her face and the rhythm of the horses beneath them. They rode side by side, talking quietly, sometimes laughing, sometimes simply enjoying the view. At one point they stopped on a high hill, looking down at the ranch, bathed in the soft light of dusk. Clara took a deep breath, feeling a sense of freedom and possibility she had never known before. Samuel looked at her, and for a moment, neither spoke. The connection between them was quiet, but profound, a recognition of the trust, companionship, and care they had built together. "I never thought I could feel this close to someone again," Samuel said softly. Clara smiled, a warmth spreading across her face. "Neither did I," she admitted. "I've always been afraid, but now I don't feel that fear as much." Samuel reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said gently. "Not with me, not here." Their bond continued to grow through small moments and shared experiences. They tended the garden together, fed the animals, and sometimes simply sat in silence, watching the sun move across the sky. Each task, each conversation, each quiet glance deepened their connection, building a foundation of trust, understanding, and companionship. Clara began to realize that the feelings she had once suppressed, hope, joy, even a quiet affection, were beginning to grow in her heart. Samuel, too, felt a warmth he had not known in years, a sense of comfort and happiness that came from sharing his life with someone he trusted completely. One rainy afternoon, as they worked inside the barn repairing a broken stall, Clara paused to look at Samuel. "I never thought life could feel this right," she said softly. "I mean, I never imagined that I could be happy again." Samuel smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and pride. "You deserve it," he said. "You've worked hard, been brave, and trusted yourself. Happiness isn't given. It's earned, and you've earned every bit of it." Clara looked at him, her eyes shining with gratitude and something more, a quiet affection that had been growing for weeks, though she did not yet name it. As the rain fell outside, drumming softly against the roof of the barn, Clara realized that the ranch had become more than just a safe place. It was a home, a sanctuary, and a place where she could grow, learn, and heal. Samuel had given her safety and freedom, but she had discovered strength and courage within herself. Together, they had created a life that was filled with possibility, companionship, and a quiet joy that neither had expected to find again. And so, as the days passed on the ranch, Clara and Samuel continued to build their bond. It was a bond rooted in trust, respect, and shared experiences, growing quietly but steadily. They laughed together, worked together, and supported each other through challenges, discovering that life could be beautiful even after hardship. In each other's presence, they found comfort, strength, and a growing sense of belonging. By the end of Part 4, their relationship had blossomed into something deep and meaningful. It was not yet spoken aloud, but the quiet affection, care, and trust between them hinted at the possibility of something more. They had learned to rely on each other, to share life's joys and challenges, and to find happiness in the simple everyday moments. And as the sun set over the fields, painting the sky with colors of hope and renewal, Clara and Samuel knew that they were no longer alone, and that the bond they shared was strong enough to face whatever the future might bring. The ranch was quiet in the early morning, the air filled with the scent of dew on grass and the soft calls of birds greeting the sunrise. Clara woke first, as she often did, and stepped outside the cabin to take a deep breath of the fresh, crisp air. She had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of the ranch, the chores, the animals, and the peaceful landscape, but lately there was a new feeling she couldn't quite put into words. It was a warmth in her chest, a gentle happiness that had been growing steadily for weeks. Samuel emerged from the barn, brushing his hands on his worn jeans, and saw Clara standing by the fence, gazing across the fields. He approached quietly, his presence familiar and comforting. "Good morning," he said softly. Clara turned to him and smiled, a real, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "Good morning," she replied. For a moment they simply stood together, the morning sun casting a golden glow over the fields, both feeling a quiet sense of contentment. The day began with the usual chores, but there was a lightness to their steps, a sense of ease and familiarity that had grown between them. Clara moved confidently among the animals, feeding the chickens, checking on the calves, and collecting eggs with steady hands. Samuel watched her, admiring not only her skill but also the joy that seemed to radiate from her every movement. She had grown so much since she had first arrived, her confidence and strength shining through the gentle kindness she showed to every living creature on the ranch. After the morning work was done, Samuel suggested they take a walk to the far pastures, a place they had discovered together weeks ago. Clara agreed eagerly, enjoying the opportunity to be outside, surrounded by open space and the beauty of the land. They walked side by side, talking about simple things, the colors of the flowers along the trail, the patterns of clouds overhead, and the behavior of the animals they passed. There was laughter between them, easy and genuine, and the kind of quiet conversation that comes from true comfort with another person. As they reached a hill overlooking the ranch, Clara paused and looked out at the fields stretching beneath the morning sun. "It's so beautiful," she whispered, her voice soft with awe. "I never imagined a place like this could exist, or that I could feel so free." Samuel stood beside her, silent for a moment, then spoke gently. "Freedom isn't just about being away from fear," he said. "It's about finding peace, safety, and joy in your life. You found that here, Clara. And you've made it even brighter with your courage and kindness." Clara turned to him, her eyes reflecting the sunlight and something deeper, a feeling she had not fully recognized until now. Their walks became a ritual, a time for reflection, conversation, and quiet companionship. They shared stories, memories, and dreams for the future, their bond growing stronger with every passing day. Samuel told Clara about his late wife, the woman who had shaped his life and left a lasting mark on his heart, and Clara listened with empathy, understanding the depth of his grief and the patience it had taken to heal. In turn, Clara shared her own experiences, her fears, and her hopes, revealing the parts of herself she had once hidden from the world. One afternoon, Samuel suggested they try something new, teaching Clara how to ride, one of the more spirited horses on the ranch. At first, Clara was nervous, remembering the unease she had felt with horses in the early days. But Samuel's calm voice and steady guidance reassured her. "Take your time," he said. "Trust yourself and trust the horse." Clara nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. With Samuel's support, she mounted the horse and felt a thrill as they began to move across the fields. At first she wobbled, but soon she found her balance, the horse responding to her gentle commands. Samuel rode alongside her, offering encouragement and praise. Clara laughed, the sound clear and free, a sound that warmed Samuel's heart in ways he could not explain. Evenings on the ranch were now filled with a quiet intimacy that neither Samuel nor Clara had anticipated. They shared meals in the cabin, talked by the fire, and sometimes sat outside watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky. There was a sense of closeness between them that went beyond friendship, a bond built on shared experiences, trust, and a growing affection neither had fully named. Clara began to notice the subtle ways Samuel cared for her, the small gestures of protection and thoughtfulness, and she felt her heart respond in kind. One evening as they sat outside the cabin, the sky ablaze with stars, Samuel spoke softly. "Clara," he said, "I've watched you grow stronger every day. I've seen your courage, your kindness, and your heart. You've brought light to this place, to my life, in ways I never expected." Clara's eyes met his, her own heart swelling with emotion. "You've saved me in more ways than one," she said quietly. "Not just from my past, but from the fear I carried. You've given me hope, and for that, I'm grateful, more than I can say." There was a long silence as they sat together, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. Finally, Samuel reached out and took Clara's hand gently in his. The simple touch was warm and reassuring, and Clara felt a thrill of emotion she could no longer deny. "Clara," he said, his voice steady but soft, "I care for you deeply. I have from the moment I realized you needed protection, but now it's more than that. I love you." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had felt the same way, though she had not spoken it aloud, unsure if it was right, unsure if she deserved such love. Now, hearing the words, she felt her heart open. "I love you too, Samuel," she whispered. The confession changed everything. It was not dramatic or rushed, but gentle and natural, like the steady flow of the stream they had often walked by. They sat together for a while longer, hands entwined, hearts full, and the knowledge that they had found each other in the midst of hardship. Love, they realized, had grown quietly, nurtured by trust, kindness, and shared life on the ranch. The following days were filled with a new energy. Their work on the ranch continued, but every task was now shared with an added layer of closeness and joy. Clara would laugh freely as Samuel teased her lightly about her careful handling of the animals, and Samuel would feel warmth in his chest every time Clara smiled at him. The quiet intimacy they had built over weeks had blossomed into a partnership of love, respect, and mutual care. One morning as they fed the animals together, Clara paused and looked at Samuel. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if we hadn't met?" she asked softly. Samuel considered her question, the sun casting warm light over the fields. "I try not to think about it too much," he replied, "because I know that meeting you is meant to be. You've changed my life, Clara, and I can't imagine it any other way." She smiled, feeling a deep sense of belonging and happiness.
"I feel the same way," she said. Their love grew stronger not through grand gestures, but through the simple everyday moments, the shared work, quiet conversations, laughter, and the support they gave each other through challenges.
Clara had learned that love could be gentle and patient, built on trust rather than expectation. And Samuel had discovered that love could heal wounds he had carried for years. Together, they had found something rare and precious, a bond that could withstand the trials of life and flourish in the warmth of mutual care. As summer approached, the ranch was alive with activity. The animals thrived, the fields were lush and green, and the cabin felt more like home than ever before. Samuel and Clara continued to explore the land, discovering hidden streams, climbing hills, and watching sunsets that seemed to stretch forever. In these moments they felt connected not only to each other but to the land that had brought them together. It was a life filled with simple joys, love, and the freedom to be themselves. One evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink, Samuel and Clara sat on the porch of the cabin, their hands intertwined. "I never thought I could be this happy," Clara said softly, leaning her head on Samuel's shoulder. "I never imagined I could feel safe, loved, and free all at once." Samuel kissed the top of her head gently. "You deserve all of it," he said. "And I'll spend every day making sure you know that. We'll face everything together, Clara, just as we always have." There was a quiet understanding between them. They had both faced loss, fear, and hardship, yet they had found each other and built a life full of hope, trust, and love. It was a love that had grown slowly, naturally, and now stood strong, ready to endure whatever challenges the future might bring. They knew that true love was not about perfection, but about acceptance, patience, and shared courage. And so life on the ranch continued, but it was now filled with a new energy. Clara and Samuel worked together, laughed together, and dreamed together. Each day brought new moments of joy, new reasons to cherish each other, and a deeper understanding of the bond they shared. The ranch was no longer just a place of work or refuge. It was a home, a sanctuary, and the setting for a love that had blossomed from compassion, courage, and shared experiences. In the quiet of the evening, as stars began to twinkle overhead and the wind whispered through the fields, Clara and Samuel knew they had found something extraordinary. They had found love, not through chance or coincidence, but through the choices they had made, the trust they had built, and the courage they had shown, and in each other they had discovered a future filled with hope, happiness, and the promise of a life lived fully and freely. For Clara, the woman who had once been trapped and afraid, the world now felt bright, welcoming, and full of possibility. For Samuel, the widower who had once believed he would live alone forever, life had opened a new chapter rich with love, companionship, and joy. Together, they had not only survived the hardships of the past, they had created a life worth celebrating, a love worth cherishing, and a home where true happiness could bloom.